but many years later, after I had left broadcasting and was doing some transportation journalism and some other things, I ended up doing some voice work here and there. It's not something that I've really actively pursued. Most of the projects that I've done have been ones that have just come up with people asking me to be involved with that. So in addition to the New York City subway, I'm also the voice on the air train, which is the monorail at Newark Liberty International Airport. I'm the voice on the Patco high speed line, which runs between Philadelphia and South Jersey. Some other things that I've done, the usual array of things that voice actors do: telephone systems, commercials, audiobook. I did an audiobook once for Penguin Random House. So a few different things that I've managed to do over the years.
So I originally wanted to be, when I was young, I was the weird kid who said, I want to be I want to make video games. And the teachers in the 90s were like, okay, just say an astronaut or something. But eventually, when got to be, the late 90s, early 2000s, and they were adding voice work into games like Baldur's Gate and the original Baldur's Gate and Half-Life and Final Fantasy X and stuff like that, I thought, oh my God, wait, I love cartoons. I love doing voices. I love acting, though I didn't realize it at the time. Maybe I should try doing voice acting. So 2004, I graduated high school, and I was like, I'm gonna get into that acting stuff. This is about the same time Maddie Blaustein came out as trans, or maybe she was trans. That came out before. This is when she just became more well known as the voice of Meowth. We gotta catch those Pokemon, that Meowth. And she was trans woman, and I thought, oh my God, wait, maybe I can do this. But I was living in Kentucky at the time, really wasn't an avenue for it, so I just put it aside for 10, 12 years until I had moved out to LA for completely other reasons. But then I was like, maybe I should try doing this again. And I did, and I'm lucky it worked. Because I love doing this stuff.
That's awesome. Mine's a little bit similar in that, like, I'm from North Dakota, and like for me, like, my household growing up wasn't the safest. There was a lot of addiction issues, and there wasn't a lot of support for LGBTQ or even knowledge or language around those sorts of things. And I knew pretty young that it was different, and I just didn't know in what way or how to even express that. But when I was about 12, my parents got a camcorder that was intended to be for, filming family events, but I quickly stole it and it became mine. I would just make silly animation videos in my room for hours and hours and hours. Like, that's just all I ever did. And I think part of it was such a great escape from that home life and not being able to control so much of my life. And from there, that's kind of where everything got born. I was so into creating these worlds and just having fun with it and having all this control. And from there, later on, growing up, realizing that, oh wow, I could actually do this kind of thing for a living. And it just kind of spiraled from there. I just kept chasing it and pursuing it until one lucky day I put a face on an orange, and it took off for whatever reason, and still getting to do it this day. So it's pretty awesome.
Wow, yeah, that's pretty awesome too. One person for the animation industry, another individual for the gaming industry, and I guess one person for like the transportation, just radio, just the industry, I imagine.
Commercial and audiobook, aka the side that actually makes money.
I see. Thank you for educating me. But yeah, that's so interesting to hear. How has identity as a trans person kind of shaped your career in voice-related work? It's particularly fascinating because we have so many different age ranges here, and I'd love to focus on the unexpected positive moments. But if you're comfortable in sharing, of course, how about any challenges as well?
Yeah, I would say for me, It's kind of been, at least starting out, it was an easy way to get my foot in the door because, I remember starting off and an industry veteran was like, "Oh yeah, everyone's looking for, people of color and trans people now, and you'll get jobs because of that." And starting out, it is helpful to get your foot in the door, but then as I found the indie sphere is amazing, but now that I'm working in like AAA games and stuff like that, it does kind of become like it's an easy way in, but it's also kind of a roadblock I've found. Just because people have presuppositions of what they expect of us, what they expect us to be, what they think we can do, what we can't do. But there are also, I mean, it's also been, I've made so many good friends, I guess because of my identity. But who can really say? But yeah, it has it's ups and downs. I would say there's goods and there's, I hate saying there's bads to it. Like there's bad reasons to be trans, which there are. It's just the way the world reflects on you. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I think for myself, my identity, it it actually helped me immensely in that I was constantly running from it. And one of the ways that I would run from it is I just poured myself into my work. And so that was just, I was just so starved for learning and trying to get better at what I was doing. And that actually, I think, is a big reason that I got to a place of success. And it wasn't until I got to that place of success that I was able to kind of like find more calm in myself and be able to reflect on it. And then it just totally switched. And I realized that, this obsession with work, it was all just a distraction from who I was inside and who I always wanted to be and was so afraid to confront and accept. And it's been wonderful now after coming out to realize, to go from a place of worrying that, oh man, if I come out, the most I'm going to get is people just saying like, okay, I guess you're doing this, maybe um somewhat acceptance, but just in general, like, all right, whatever, to really realizing after I came out, I have gotten more love in my life than I ever have. And it really made me realize how much love and support there really is out there. And it really does reveal who your true friends and family are. So I've been very, very, very lucky in that way. To just, I don't know, to go on that journey. So yeah, that's kind of my path anyway.
For me, I've known I was trans from my earliest memories, but I was growing up in the 1960s and the 1970s, so I am by far the oldest person who's on this panel. And there
Mhm.
was no way that I could have ever foreseen when I was growing up, and for a good part of my adult life, that I would ever be able to transition. So my
Mhm.
social transition is only about 2.5 years old. So most of my
Mhm.
voice work, in fact, all of my voice work really was done with what I call the guy voice. And when I transitioned 2.5 years ago, because my voice is relatively well known in the New York area, it became something that a lot of the media picked up on. I was surprised. I had stories in the Washington Post, the Associated Press, Reuters, the New York Times, Good Morning America. I did a lot of different media things. And the hook on all those stories was my voice. Um, if you ever ride the subway, you would hear something like this. The next downtown 2 train is approaching the station. Please stand away from the platform edge. And then I go back to this voice. So it's almost like a party trick that I could do of
Mhm.
changing between voices. But the unusualness of that, I don't want to say uniqueness because I'm sure there are other people who do that, but the unusualness of that has also caught others' attention. So I've had these wonderful experiences that have come up. last year, this month in June, I got a call from a sound engineer up in Toronto, and he says, "Hey, we'd like to use your voice for an album that's being put together." And some other people have contacted me over the years, and usually these are like independent things. And I said, "Okay, fine. You have to sign an NDA. We'll tell you more about the project once you do that." I did it. And then he calls back and he says, "This is for an album that Lin-Manuel Miranda is putting together. He's doing a musical version of the movie The Warriors, and he would like you to be the train conductor on this album." So this notoriety that has come along with my transition has led to all kinds of crazy opportunities that I never could have anticipated. That was probably the biggest one. But that same month, I was in a short film that's won a number of awards. I had an opportunity to do a piece on CBS Mornings where I wrote a letter to my 18-year-old self, sort of as encouragement to that person, to let her know that things were going to be all right, that you would eventually get to transition and all this would happen. So, like Dana said, or Dane said, I'm sorry,
Okay.
there's been all kinds of crazy opportunities. Friendships have developed, new family has come up. It's been just this amazing, best word I can use, magical experience for me.
Mhm. Well, can I ask what I'd be so curious, and I don't want to take over the role of moderator here, but what was
No, you're
like
fine. You're fine.
I'd love to hear like what was kind of the tipping point for each of you where you kind of got to the point where you're like, you know what, I'm doing this. I'm doing this.
Mine was very dark. Trigger warning. I was it was 2006. I was flunking all my classes. I was spending all my hours playing Final Fantasy 11, and I was running out of money, and I was on the top of my 17-story building, and you can guess what thoughts were going on through my head. And I thought
Mhm.
to myself, you know what? Shit can't get any worse now. Maybe I'll tell someone. And I told my mom, and very slowly built my life back up.
That's
For
awesome.
me, it was a very innocent thing. This was 2017. And I saw that they were doing some things with this new app called Face App, where they were uploading
Mhm.
photos of
Oh
NFL
gosh,
quarterbacks and
yes.
showing what they would look like as women. And one of the big things that held me back for so long was my fear that if I ever transitioned, I would look hideous, that I would be a laughing stock. That scared the heck
Mhm.
out of me. And by this point,
Same.
remember, because I'm older,
Mhm.
I've developed a career, a marriage, 3 adult children, grandchildren. All this has been developed in my life, and I was terribly afraid of throwing it all away. And that is what really started the ball rolling. When I saw this photo that didn't look hideous, that showed me that I had a resemblance to my mom, that maybe this would be possible. So I started a very, very slow transition, starting with that very innocent app that I had played around with.
It's wild how many people like I don't know, it seems like that's a very unifying trans story using that face app. And then,
Yeah, I
it
definitely use
unlocking
it a
something
bit.
inside of you. Mhm.
Hmm.
I remember you talking about the fear that just grips you of like it'll never work for me. Because I remember when I was 12, 13 years old, first learning about, we didn't say no one said transgender in Kentucky, and back then it was transsexual, or
Mhm.
the one that
Or
has a
something
V in it,
worse.
or
Yeah.
something. Yeah. You can imagine searching on 1998 internet what that would give you.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, technology has some awful parts to it, modern technology, but it also has some really good parts too.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
I mean, you kinda see that today. I've never, this is it's so cool to do something like this and see how many people from probably all over the world get to just kinda connect in, and it's kinda
Mhm.
like we're all here together, so it's really,
Right, right,
technology can
right.
be a
Yeah.
beautiful
And
thing.
for everyone like wondering in the Trans Academy instance right now, yeah, they can see you. We do have a camera pointed at you, so if you want to like, I think it's like if you wave a bit, like 45 degrees, and then start waving, they could definitely see that too. That's just something I wanted to point out. All right, let's move on to the next question though. As you know, transness and just the LGBTQIA plus spectrum has gone more and more represented, especially in like media. I'd love to hear your thoughts on just the current representation and how it and the comparison how it used to be until now, and kind of how you want to see that future grow.
I just want to see more queer stories.
Yeah, I want to see more queer stories written by queer people.
Mhm.
Instead of like, cis people patting themselves in the back for look at this good inclusion character we put in there kind of stuff,
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
you can tell. Even when cis people write it, when they write it just cuz like, yeah, I think that's cool. I think it should be cool. You can tell. And it's
Mhm.
lovely to see. I think there's so much more of that now. I think we've got a myriad spectrum of like even within each individual, like trans women, trans men, non-binary, gender fluid, you've got varied. It's not just the old stereotypes. I think there's still a lot of work to be done. Obviously, many of these trans characters are still voiced by cisgender people looking at you fighting games. But it's wonderful to see because when I was a kid, we didn't have any of that shit. We had the original Ranma 1/2, and even that was just us projecting onto it.
Yeah, I think obviously, like one of the things that drives me absolutely nuts is that anytime there is any sort of inclusion or difference, different stories, whether it be LGBTQ, women, whatever, everything gets labeled as woke, and everybody, there's a certain section of the world that's like, oh my God, how dare we? And it's like, okay, those, like, first of all, settle down. We have enough of your stories, and your stories will still be continued to be told. But we can hear other people's stories too because they exist and we ain't going away. Sorry.
Yeah, and I would just again from having a little more history than Sena and Dane, that I remember growing up. Anytime there was a what you might consider a trans character displayed on television or in movies, it was almost always for comic relief or it was tragic, and it was almost
Mhm.
always played by a cisgender person. That there was never any accurate representation that I saw growing up. So there was nothing that I could look to and say, "Oh, maybe this could be my future."
Yeah, that's why like one of the reasons that these stories and hearing stories from queer creators are so important because it just at the end of the day, it just lets people know that, you know, these are normal things and queer people are they're just like everybody else. They want the same sorts of things. They want happiness, health, life, friends, family. And, ultimately, for me, at the end of the day, those stories being out there, they're just messages to other people that it's okay to be different.
Mhm.
Yeah, I definitely really like that we're moving in a direction that is, a much more natural expression of their identity instead of it being like the forefront of their character. But I very much appreciate these responses. Moving on to a next question. This is actually a question that I asked last year with our previous panelists, but it's also very interesting and honestly enlightening in some ways. So for everyone who does like character voice acting or different role voice acting, like how do you approach finding or creating that voice for someone that is different than you? And for you, Bernie, for narration broadcasts, how do you bring your own authenticity and your own personal identity to a voice that's traditionally neutral? It's a pretty big long question, but feel free to dissect it.
Mhm.
Well, for me, I haven't done too many character voices. I've done a few for Patco, the transit line down in Philadelphia, where around the holidays they wanted me to be Santa or the Grinch or Frosty the Snowman. And all I did for those was, well, Santa's fairly easy, but for Frosty, I was going to YouTube and looking at the cartoon that was done in the 1960s to hear how Frosty spoke and tried to imitate that. But for most of the other things, it's my quote unquote real voice, although obviously a little bit more put on, in terms of enunciation being more clear and things like that. And I think the biggest thing that I've tried to do to let my personality come through is just a standard thing that a lot of voice people will talk about, putting a smile in my voice, that I want that voice to sound welcoming, not to sound robotic, to have some personality behind it. Even with the subways, where all you're hearing are these little 1 or 2 word segments that are being pieced together by a computer, that can still come through if you're trying to do that and do it well. But a lot of what I do, since I'm talking to people who are using a transit system, I try to imagine the person that I'm talking to is a visitor from out of town who is stressed trying to figure out where they're going. The New York City subway system, if you've ever looked at a map, is pretty confusing, even if you're a native. But to just let them know that this voice that they're hearing is watching out for them. So those are some of the things that I try to do. The audiobook that I did, it was just a forward for a book. And I was reading the words of a medical doctor. And I just, again, tried to put myself into his shoes and what he was trying to say as I read it, but at the same time, not trying to do an impression or anything like that, do my own voice, but let all that come through. And some other things that I've done is, again, just variations on who I really am. But I think one of the things I do want to mention, for a long time, people would ask, well, how would you describe yourself? And there are different, voiceover artist, voice actor, voice artist, etc., that you can describe. Since I've transitioned, I've pretty much settled on voice actor. And the reason I settled on that is because when I do most of my voice work, I am doing the guy voice. And as an actor, what do actors do? They portray somebody they are not. So that helps me when I'm have to do the guy voice. Remember, I am just playing a character, and that's who I am. So that's one of the things that I've used to help me.
That's awesome. Yeah, sorry. Let's.
No, you're fine. You're fine. This is a difficult question because it's really hard. It's if we knew the $1 million answer to that $1 million question, auditions wouldn't be so terrifying and opaque all the time. Personally, I tend to care much more about personality than voice print. Like, I have stock voice prints I've just gathered over the years from I've got one that's like, this is my shonen protagonist voice or whatever. And I'll just make variations depending on what the client wants. But the problem with auditions is obviously who knows what the client wants. They probably don't even know what they want yet. Like, they'll say 30s to 40s female. And it's like, okay, are they happy? Are they snide? What are they? How'd they grow up? What's that? I'm more concerned about that stuff. But that's the stuff you learn later once you actually book the part. I guess the best way... having someone to direct you always helps because acting is always a collaborative process. Like, for instance, with Wuklamat in Final Fantasy XIV, they asked me, we hadn't really thought of an accent. Which accent do you want? Because I had auditioned with both a standard American accent and obviously the one the Puerto Rican one that I ultimately went with. And they just kind of asked, like, which one do you want? And I'm on the spot, like, I think I want the Puerto Rican because representation. And now 2 years later, that's the basis for the entire game. I don't know where I was going with this tangent. Dang, take it away.
I think it's interesting.
Fascinating, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it's interesting because I have a little bit different of a perspective because thankfully, I didn't ever have to like do any sort of like interview process or that sort of thing. Um, I was lucky in that the thing I created was the thing that I then, would voice. And for me, it's just I mean, it's as simple as, whatever the character is kind of like, what is the archetype for that character? Are they generally just angry and then, happy or whatever? And that'll kind of determine the voice that I'll do for them. Um, but I was going to say, to your point about it's awesome having a director there. When for a little while we did a spin-off TV show on Cartoon Network for a couple years, and there, instead of it just being me in my own recording booth, determining all of the characters and what they sounded like, it was really interesting working with a director in the room who would say, "Okay, I like that voice, but could you, make it a little bit more gravelly, or could you, throw this twist in there?" And oftentimes I found that that actually really would bring out a lot more fun things in the character that I would have never thought of. So yeah, when it comes down to collaborative creation with other people, I think that's one of those things that really does help determine a really great character in the end.
Wow. I mean, these are all very different answers. I think it's just such so hallmark just seeing these three different experiences here. But thank you so much. Uh, I want to kind of like flip that question and kind of ask, how, the characters that you voice or the projects that you do, has any of those characters or, have they imprinted on you? And, have they affected your own voice and identity in everyday life?
I
I
think
mean,
it's a
for me,
good
somewhat.
question.
I feel like I'm always like annoying Orange's voice is always in my head. It's in some way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
I'm still doing it after all these years, and I'm still always kind of thinking of different ideas for silly shorts or what have you. And so, yeah, for whatever reason, his voice will always kind of pop in my head here and there. Not in a overall negative way or anything like that, but yeah, it's one of those things that just kind of sticks with you. You do it for what, 16 years, and yeah, it sticks with you. I'm sure anybody who's done it for a really long time.
Yeah, it's crazy to imagine that it's been 16 years of annoying orange. Wow.
I can't imagine it.
Well, for me,
Mm.
again, since it's really a variation on my regular voice, but what I've found is when I do public speaking, especially in person, that doing that voice is a way to break down walls. And I will use that to help
Mm.
win the audience over. I remember as a kid watching Mel Blanc appear on talk shows, The Tonight Show or Mike Douglas, those kinds of shows. And for those of you who don't know, Mel Blanc was the Warner Brothers cartoon voice, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Elmer Fudd, et cetera, et cetera. He did all these voices. And he would come on and do one of those voices, and the audience would go crazy when suddenly Bugs Bunny's voice came out of his mouth. Well, certainly not to the same extent as Mel Blanc, but when I am doing a presentation and will say, here's a voice that you might better recognize, it almost automatically gets the audience clapping and laughing and cheering because it's something, at least for those in the New York area, that almost every New Yorker knows that voice and they hear it, and they're hearing it in a different context. They're hearing it come out of a living person in front of them, not through speakers that are in the subway station while they're waiting for the train. So that, I think, is for me one of the hallmarks of doing the voice, so to speak, and affects me.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, Sina, do you have full control over your voice roles, or do your voice roles sometimes control you?
Um, I I think the only way I can really think about it is I'm so preoccupied with like what's gonna book, what's gonna sell, just because we live in a capitalist hellscape. Um, that my latest crusade has been just like to get studios out here to realize, yes, you can book us for men. It's okay. We would prefer to have a career. Most of our vocal range is still there. But that's also, I found it's kind of gotten in my head a little bit. And I found my default voice, which used to be like, I used to speak way more up here most of the time, which is a bit more feminine. And I used to have like more feminine range, more feminine, like, not range, vocal print in my natural, normal speaking voice, and it's kind of lowered, which this is a very thing I don't really have a total answer for, because it's something I'm still like currently gripping with myself, like, oh fuck, is this really worth it, yada yada yada. you know
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it.
Mhm.
I think we share that like experience of, oh, I really want a really high voice,
Mhm.
but then as I've gone through the years, I've kind of mellowed down, just like chilled out to this. So I definitely do get
Mhm.
I definitely do get it. Thank you so much. And like Bruna, your point about people come alive when you do the subway system voice. I really like, just from a personal standpoint, I never really thought about the voice behind something so like like instrumental as the subway system, right? And now that you're here sharing your story and your experience, it's kind of crazy. And Dane, annoying orange, it's very pervasive, whether society likes it or not. It's such a big cultural
Mhm.
footprint for sure. So it makes
Mhm.
sense that annoying orange is always with you. Moving on though, this is the question that I'm like personally curious, because I want to like kind of have that imagine it myself for when I hear people who are doing voice acting are experiencing. So like, can you like share a moment in your voice career that made you feel especially proud or affirmed of your perceived gender?
uh well, definitely getting to voice a 19-year-old cisgender girl in a Japanese RPG was a very nice one,
Mhm.
especially when during the I mean, it's wild to think that, because I thought all I was ever going to get to do was trans women and moms. um but especially when we were in the booth, I remember there were some instances where I naturally wanted to bring it up here, and they'd be like, could you actually bring it down back more to your natural register? And I'm like, you want my natural register? You want my natural
Aw.
register for this girl that's half my age, this cisgender girl half my age? Oh my gosh.
Well, for me, um, almost 100% of what I do is, again, the guy voice. But last year, I was asked to audition for a national TV spot for Fanta Soda. And I was prepared to use the guy voice for that. And that was the first take I did, was the guy voice. But then they said, we'd like to hear the female voice. And it was the first and only time so far that I have used a more feminine voice to audition for a spot. It ended up that, as far as I know, the commercial was never done with anybody, but I wasn't picked for doing that. But that was perhaps the first and only time so far that I've used a more feminine voice. And I will readily acknowledge that my guy voice, I think, is far better, because I've had so many years of experience using it, than this voice. This voice is still very much a work in progress, and I don't know that I'll ever be 100% happy with it, but I keep on practicing and trying to get it there.
Well, if you're ever interested, this is maybe a shameless plug, but every weekends we do have our voice modulation workshop that is free to attend, and we have our wonderful voice teachers kind of diagnose or like give you feedback on your voice, you know.
Oh,
But yeah,
excellent.
sorry about that.
Check that out.
Yeah,
You got to get those shameless plugs in where you can.
definitely, definitely. Dane, how about you?
It's thinking about it, it's interesting. It's because the thing that I think that I'm most proud of, or at least was most proud of in the moment, wasn't because of the actual, like, literal voice that I did, but more as the voice as a queer person in general. Before I came out, because I came out a couple years ago, on a video for Smosh on YouTube. But before then, I did the previous Pride Month. I did an episode where one of the characters on the show, Marshmallow, comes out as non-binary. Because there had been this long running joke. It was kind of like the Pat character from SNL. Is Marshmallow a boy or a girl? And there was a lot of jokes that would come out of that. And, based on my own gender journey, I kind of got to the point where it's like, I want to I want to stop this joke and I want to answer it, and I want to answer it in a way that's going to make me happy, and also, kind of send the message out there to people that, yeah, there's other identities out there and that sort of thing. And so I made that video, and it and I was very proud of the video. I did a lot of things, animation wise, that I hadn't done before. I put a lot of work into it, a lot of heart and soul into it, and it was very well received. Like, a lot of the true fans were so happy, and they thought it was so cool. And then, of course, the right wing media got a hold of it and kind of got brigaded a little bit. And apparently, I ruined a lot of childhoods just because a Marshmallow turned out to be non-binary, um, which is completely silly and ridiculous, at the end of the day. But for me, that was definitely a stepping stone, because I myself, I don't think I was at the point where I could admit, I'm a trans woman, because that was a scary thing for me to say. But I was ready to say that I'm non-binary and trans feminine, at the very least. But that video kind of being like the stepping stone to that, and kind of seeing the reactions around it, even though there was a lot of stupid things that were said and hate and whatever, that there was so much more of an outpouring of excitement and love. I think that definitely helped me kind of get to the next step of being able to say it to the world, that that was me too. It wasn't just this character on my show. So that was probably, yeah, now that I think about it, that's probably my favorite moment.
Wow, so that was like kind of like a coming out trial run, huh?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
that's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, well, let's pivot on like from the past and kind of go into the future. Are there any dream projects, roles, collaborations, or just anything you'd want to do? Just like, is there anything you'd love to do?
Well, I think Bernie, Sena, and I need to do a collab now, right?
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's do that.
Oh, awesome!
There we go. I get asked this a lot, and I feel I swear I don't mean this as boasting, but voicing for Final Fantasy 14 kind of was my dream role.
Mm.
I would have loved to be in the new Ranma thing, but you audition for it, and they cast who they cast. I got to audition for it anyway, so it's like whatever. I think my dream role now, this is such a tacky, like, roll your eyes answer, but like, I want to be cast in something my friend writes.
No one's rolling eyes,
Like,
I promise.
wait, you got a show? Wait, can I be in it? I can? Yo! That kind of.
Oh, I
Yeah,
love
that
that.
would be awesome. Well, aside from you two collaborating, anyone, anyone or any project or even any community you'd like to be part of, Dane or Bernie?
For me, like I say, getting to work with Lin-Manuel Miranda was absolutely amazing. I never could have imagined in a million years that he would reach out and ask me to be a part of one of his projects. So the only thing that I'm keeping my fingers crossed on is he and Issa Davis, who co-wrote Warriors, are now putting together the Broadway version of Warriors. And I don't expect that I would be live. I would love, though, to be the recorded voice in the Broadway version of Warriors. That would be amazingly cool to be on Broadway.
We need you to be the lady who's like, listen up, cats. You're the one, it's going down tonight. You're the lady on the. We need you. We need you to voice that. Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure Lin-Manuel Miranda is watching the stream right now. So that's her mark of interest there. Dave,
Well, wait, I don't know. It's funny. I think back to before, everything kind of took off for me, and then we started doing the TV show, and I was always so interested in like the idea of working with celebrities and that whole thing, and then all of that coming true. Like when we were doing the TV show, it was crazy. I would walk into the studio and it was a different celebrity in there every single day doing voices for the show. Whether it be Dave Grohl, Weird Al, Olivia Munn. It was so wild and surreal that I feel like I never really got a chance to sit down and really take it all in and be like, wow, this is my life. Holy crap. Um, so in all actuality, like a lot of those people I got to work with, was very lucky in that, kind of got to check off a lot of those things. But I think, as I move forward now, obviously people ask me if I still actually enjoy doing Annoying Orange, and I do. I don't know. I've always wanted to be an animator, and of course, voice acting goes along with that. And it's such a wonderful thing to be able to still do it after 16 years. Like that's what I went to school for. It's what I always wanted, and I still get to do it. But now I think kind of moving forward, I think, I kind of my goal is to somehow incorporate, I guess, more of my personal stories or, queer stories in general, because I think that's a really important thing right now is there's a lot of hate and a lot of backlash right now. And no, don't get me wrong. I know, like Bernie, you said, like, look what it was this long ago. And no doubt we've made incredible progress. But of course, we're kind of at that place where it feels like we're taking a couple steps back. But I think just like we're doing today, I think it's so important to just hear queer stories you know, and help people realize that it's not scary. It's just different. And their job in the world is not to lead with hate, but lead with curiosity. If you don't know about something or, you know, something scares you, the best thing you could do is react by being curious and asking questions. And that's kind of what I would hope to do in the future is kind of incorporate some of those things.
yeah, definitely. That policy is very good. Just being a bit more curious and asking questions
Mhm.
instead of jumping to conclusions. And I think you have something that a lot of people desire in their life is just finding that one thing and just going for it for the next 16 years and still being insanely happy. That is definitely a rare thing to have.
Mhm.
So I'm very
Mhm.
happy for you. And yeah. Moving on to my next question, though. For people who are gender nonconforming, trans folks interested in getting started in, any kind of voice work, is there any advice, or you could kind of like you see it as like, is there any advice you'd give yourself? I guess that's like a two-parter question, but you know,
I'd say the same. Honestly, I'd say the same. I say it to cisgender folks is just take classes. Before you make any huge commitments like buying gear and all this, and microphones and all this shit, see if it's something you like. Because it's 95% acting, 5% voice. So take some acting classes. See if you like it.
Mhm.
Just network. Because we all fall into the trap of like, well, I want to work with Matt Mercer or whoever, but like the people you're going to be working with are the friends you're making now who are also starting out. So 5 years down the road, y'all are going to be, tight.
The advice I give, and again, I agree with what Sena says, that it would be the same whether you're cis or trans or non-binary, that if you're starting out, start with something you already know. In my case, I just kind of fell into doing transportation related voices because I worked in the transportation business. I knew a lot of people in the transportation business, but if you work in the restaurant business or the real estate business or whatever business it may be, there are probably opportunities for voice to be used. It might be training videos, a recording on the phone at the real estate office, simple things. You may not even get paid for it to start, but it's an opportunity to learn, to see, again, like Sena says, do you like this? Is this something you would like to do? Build up a little bit of a resume that you can then go forth. Again, I would also agree about acting. Acting is something that I wish I had had more training in when I was growing up, but it is something that can be very useful, obviously, in terms of doing voice work. But I say, start with what you already know and who you already know, that you can go to these people and say, hey, I'm interested in starting to learn a little bit about voice work. Can I do this? And see where it goes.
Yeah, kind of to piggyback on what Seema was saying, I think, in addition to taking classes too, I mean, there's always lots of resources out there like YouTube. There's so many kind of tutorial videos about those sorts of things that I think, even just starting out, there's a lot of great voice actors and teachers that have tutorials and things that you can watch and that sort of thing. I think one of the big things is not to be afraid to put yourself out there. I have met so many people in my life that were so extremely talented that should be at the top of the food chain, but I think because of a fear of putting themselves out there, they just didn't quite get to where they ultimately wanted to be. So it's a scary thing to fail, but failure isn't inherently a bad thing. Often failure just leads to information. If you fail at something, that's a good opportunity to ask yourself, okay, what did I do wrong? What can I do differently next time? That sort of thing. So yeah, putting yourself out there, I think, is a big one, whether that's, uploading videos to YouTube or just doing voices and having your friends listen to them and give you feedback, that sort of thing. So
I
Awesome.
would
Yeah,
also be
great
remiss
answer.
if
Oh,
I did not. Sorry, I would also be
no, don't
remiss if I
worry.
did not mention QueerVox is an organization here based in Los Angeles, headed by JP Karliak is the president of it. He's a voice actor in lots of stuff like X-Men '97 and stuff like that. Um, it is for LGBTQ voice actors. They do lots of they have a Discord. They have a list that casting directors use to find queer talent. They have classes, all sorts of stuff. It's an amazing resource.
mm.
QueerVox again is what it's called.
That sounds like a great repository. And I did contact them, and they're very nice and very, very helpful in this, search for these panelists. I wanted to ask another question because that got me curious. What would you tell people who are already in the, the voice acting, voiceover artist industry, but are thinking of coming out?
Do it.
I mean, obviously, do it.
Yeah.
Please
No.
don't be afraid. Oh, it's gonna ruin my career, etc., etc. I mean, I'm not guaranteeing nothing will happen because you have to be realistic. There are some folks who have been the industry had always seen them as a cis man, and recently they came out as a trans woman, and I'd love to pick their brains to see what their experiences have been. Be cautious, be smart. Um, we we are in a weird world, a weird reactionary time. You might have to make a sacrifice. You might have to use a pseudonym, which would fucking suck. But, um, you know, do what makes you comfortable first.
Yeah, I
But
think doing it
transitioning will
on
make you
your
very comfortable. I'm just letting you know right now. You'll feel so much better in your own skin.
you will,
I feel like
absolutely.
I feel like, and you two can piggyback off of me if you've had this experience before, that people say like, you're just so much happier now. Like,
Mhm.
I didn't think you could be this happy. And I'm just like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely not, I wouldn't say it's easy by any
Yeah.
means. It's one of the harder things you'll ever have to do in your life, if not the hardest. But once you get to the other side, it's kind of fascinating, at least for me. I can only speak for myself, but getting on the other side of it and kind of thinking like, okay, that wasn't even close to as scary as I should have made it out to be. But of course, kind of to piggyback on what you were saying, I think it's important to do it on your own timeline. There is no one can tell you how quickly you should go about doing it. I know for myself, it was a years long process, even once I was able to come out to my therapist. From there, it was telling my wife and then, telling family members and friends, and then eventually getting to the point where it was coming out to the entire world. It was a process. And even then, I didn't have the confidence to say, you know what, I'm a trans woman. At first it was, I'm non-binary first and gender fluid, it just, and at the, for a lot of people, there's steps to it, and that's okay. So,
For me, I would say again, I would encourage you to come out again, as Dane said, on your own timeline. Do it when it's right for you. For me, I knew that I was going to be transitioning. I reached out to all of my major clients and told them that this was happening. It wasn't a question of asking permission. It was saying, this is going to happen. And I didn't want them to learn about it secondhand through a newspaper story or TV report or something like that. Without exception, they were all supportive. I was very nervous and scared as I talked to them, but they were all very, very supportive. And again, with voice acting, you're not being seen for the most part. So
mhm.
who you are, how you present is really inconsequential in many respects to the job that you're being hired to do. So that was not an issue. And the other thing that I would say, you never know where it's going to lead. I talked about some of these things that I've been able to do, and I don't believe I would have been asked by Lin-Manuel Miranda to do this had he not seen an article in the New York Times about me. That was what opened the door. And there was another thing that happened back in January where I get a call from a producer at Paramount Plus that they wanted me to voice some lines for a show that's coming out this fall. And again, that raised my visibility. So you never know what possibilities there are. And even if you are in a place that's not particularly trans friendly, again, because of technology, you can be working in places that are trans friendly, like New York or Los Angeles. So that's not an issue if you are doing work outside of maybe some spots that aren't so supportive.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's great advice, honestly. Thank you so
Mhm.
much. As we're getting towards the top of the hour, I just wanted to close out. Thank you so much for taking your time and your thoughts, and we very much appreciate you. I just wanted to give this like last few minutes, like about what, two to 1 minute even, just like where can we find and follow you? Any closing remarks you have? I'd love just for you to take the stage.
I have no online presence at all, so no. If you want to follow my stuff, it's just annoying orange on YouTube or mainly YouTube. I mean, I do post on Instagram and Facebook a little bit and TikTok and stuff, but YouTube's the main one. So, and then if you want to follow me personally, I think the thing I use most is Instagram, and my handle is DaneBo1. So,
For me, it is Instagram is Cranford_radio. I'm also, because I'm a dinosaur, I'm also on Facebook. But I'm the only Bernie Wagenblast in the world, so if you just do a search on my name, you will find lots of stuff, mostly that others have done, but that showcases some of my work.
What was your handle again on
Cranford,
Instagram?
it's Cranford, CRAN. Actually, let me turn my mic flag here. You can read it. Cranford_radio.
There
That's what I
you
need to get.
are.
I need to get one of those little things right there for the branding. That's what I need.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
That's
Okay,
more
I
for my
just followed you.
podcast.
I'm mostly really only on Blue Sky. I was on Twitter/X, but then it turned into a Nazi website, so I fled to Blue Sky.
Mhm.
I also stream on Twitch at Squid Sena. Why did I say my name wrong? Jesus Christ. I hear so many people say my name wrong. It's affecting me. Squid Sena.
See, awesome,
Squid
awesome.
Santa.
But I do I have some things in the pipeline coming up that I just can't talk about. They're actually not like, oh, I'm gonna be in this game or whatever, but like personal actual projects and collaborations that like I could technically talk about because it's our project, but it's like I want to wait until later.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yep.
Well, good thing we're at the top of the hour. So I'd like to thank
Hey.
our panelists once again. Thank you so much. I will see you all later. Stage people, in the instance, I'll see you in about 5 seconds. Thank you so much for coming to our Queer Voices panel. And yeah, we have more stuff coming along the way today. And yes, have a great weekend, panelists, and have a great TBVR, everyone else, I mean,
Mhm.
including the panelists
Take
as
care,
well.
everyone.
But yeah, just
If
you
you're going
wave,
protesting,
bye bye.
be very careful.
Thank you.
Yes.